Well, here we are at the end of this series called A Summer of Prophetic Preaching. And I have to hand it to you because you are still here, most of you. You've made it through those long stories about Elijah and Elisha. You listened to what Paul had to say about freedom. You hung in there, even when Amos and Hosea and Isaiah were telling us that we didn't love God or neighbor nearly enough. But those of you who are here today deserve a special commendation because you knew that I was going to be telling you what Jesus says about money, and you came anyway. Good for you. Let me make it clear from the outset that this is not going to be one of those stewardship sermons where the preacher does everything he can to persuade you to give everything you can to the church. I've preached those sermons before. I'm sure that I will again, but not today. Today I want to gather up some of the readings from Luke 12 that we have skipped over in the last few weeks and ask you to simply listen to what Jesus says about our relationship to money. It begins with a request. Jesus is making his way toward Jerusalem when someone in the crowd calls out to him and says, "Teacher, make my brother divide the inheritance with me." But Jesus says, "Friend, who made me judge and divider over you?" Which is a response I wish I could have remembered when someone asked me the same question. Let's call him Sam. Sam had received an inheritance from his parents, but his brother was watching over the money until Sam needed it. Sam thought he needed it right then, and he came to me and said, "Would you write my brother a letter and let him know that I need my money? Tell him to give it to me." It wasn't a lot of money as these things go, just a few $1,000s really. But Sam believed that this money would make all the difference in his life, that he would be able to pay off his existing debts and buy a few nice things and maybe take that trip to Italy he'd been dreaming about for years. "Write to my brother," he said. "Tell him to give me the money." Now, I should have said, "Friend, who made me judge and divider over you?" But instead I said, "Okay." I wrote his brother a letter. I said, "Sam seems to think this money would make all the difference in his life. Could you let him have it, please?" His brother wrote back and said, "You don't understand. Sam has never handled money well. My mother and father begged me not to give this inheritance to him until he really needs it. I'm trying to honor their request." So I told Sam what his brother had said, and he said, "When I really need it, why, I need it right now. Write to him again. Tell him I need the money." So I wrote another letter. I said, "Look, just give Sam the money. If he wastes it, he wastes it, but at least he won't be mad at you." And the brother wrote back and said, "Yes, that would be easier, but it wouldn't be the best thing for Sam. You have to believe me." And so I said to Sam, "It doesn't look like you're going to get that money." And I have never seen anyone get so angry over a few $1,000s. He shook his fist and cursed his brother, and that's when I realized I should have just stayed out of it. I should have said what Jesus said, "Friend, who made me judge and divider over you?" Jesus understood how these things work. He knew that we are capable of putting our relationship to money and things above our relationship to God and others. And so he says to the crowd, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed, because a man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." He says it as if he were riding in your car when you begin to drift across the double yellow line into a lane of oncoming traffic. Watch out! As if he knew. Greed kills. And then he tells this story about a rich man whose land produced an abundant crop. Everything had come together perfectly. The man had fertilized the soil in advance of the growing season. The rains had come at the right time and in sufficient quantity. The crops began to grow as they had never grown before. And so he ended up with a problem, a good problem, but a problem nonetheless. What will I do with this enormous crop? My barns aren't big enough to hold it. He thought about it and finally decided, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build some bigger ones, and then I will have plenty of room to store up my grain and my goods. And then I will say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But that's when God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And that's what it will be like, Jesus says, with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. I've sometimes wondered what the man's sin was, which may only show how deeply indoctrinated I have become in the ways of the world. He was a wealthy landowner. His land produced this abundant crop. He built some bigger barns to store it all, and then he celebrated his good fortune. What's the crime in that? You and I probably wouldn't call him a fool. We would probably call him in the middle of our next capital campaign. But God calls him a fool. Why? Because it is only when his barns are full that he can relax. In the most literal translations of verse 19, the man says to his soul, "Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax. Eat, drink, be merry," which is to say that until his barns were full, his soul could not relax. It was clenched like a fist in all his anxious striving to get more and more and more, and it may have been what led to his heart attack. Who knows?